Now, Sanusha Naidu is a policy analyst at the Institute of Global Dialogue. Some hours ago, we spoke about the enormous difference in ideas around governance and even the philosophy behind it between these main parties, the ANC, the Democratic Alliance, the EFF and the MK. Here's part of that conversation.
What's key right now is not what the political parties want, but what the South African public or the electorate voted in on 29th May in terms of the fact that they gave no political party a majority to go in, even if it was a 45%, if the ANC was hoping for at the end of the election results being confirmed. I think they would have actually taken a 45%, because a 45% result would have given an ANC less of these headaches in terms of negotiating with the smaller parties. So I think right now the kind of ideological lay of the land is not necessarily, oh, we won't talk to this person, we won't talk to that person because we don't want to talk to them. Is that they don't have a choice but to talk to each other.
But, and I'm granted, the one weakness in the argument I'm about to make is that I'm extrapolating from one metro area into the wider national conversation. But let's use Johannesburg as an example, right? It had 5 mayors in between 2021 and 2023, right? And in that period of time, people in Joburg have seen coalitions fall apart, mayors coming and going, public services falling apart. In that sort of context, given the experience the ANC has had, at least at local government level, the argument for them might be, look, we really don't want to replicate this at the top end. We might as well just muddle through with a minority government.
Well, let me just correct you on that one. I think the model you're looking at has not been one that has been tested in the context of those metros you mentioned and the 5 mayors. I think the 5 mayors that you mentioned, that was very transactional. That was because at that point, that was a local government election. And I think it's a closer call in terms of how you govern at the local government level. But I think the replication you're referring to is the lessons to be learned of what not to do in the kind of transactional point you raise. The challenge we have in South Africa right now, and if political parties were much more astute than transactional going into this election, including the ANC, including the DA, they would have formed some kind of coalition strategy. They wish they didn't do, by the way. And of course, now we see Action SA has pulled out of the multi-party charter, saying that they can't go into this charter because they feel that the principles of that charter have been essentially not abided to. So if you're looking at one metro, I would say to you, look at the other metro, which is Nelson Mandela Bay in the Eastern Cape. And I think the problem we're having right now is that when you go in with these smaller parties, it's very transactional. They want to get out of that. Right now, those smaller parties are not necessarily in the game, the ones that you're mentioning. The ones that you have to think about are the ANC, the DA, and I think what's happening
but they would have their own demands, right? I mean, like you just pointed out a little earlier, MK would say, look, we're not going to talk to the ANC unless Ramaphosa is out of the picture. The DA will probably say something along the lines of, look, if we're going to get into any sort of deal with you, we'd have our own demands.
Listen. When you're in the country and you can see the nuances, I think when you look from the outside in, you're taking it at face value. Don't take it at face value. I think every single party, with barring the MK, which has been really adamant and arrogant about what it wants, I think actually in itself, it may have been a disruptor, but it may be isolating itself to just one metro, and that is in KZN, which is the eThekwini. And right now, they also have to form a government in eThekwini. Who do they talk to? They don't want to talk to the ANC in eThekwini because of their position. Will they talk to the DA? No. The only other party they may want to talk to is the IFP, but that would be very interesting to see how the IFP may have some leverage in that context. And of course, the other party that comes closest to them to talk to, but only has 2.2% of the vote, of the provincial vote in KZN, is the EFF. So I think be careful in drawing extrapolations based on what people are saying. Right now, even within the DA, there are certain elements around how to talk to each other.
What about a third minority option, rather a third alternative deal on the table? Do you think that the ANC might make a move to essentially go to the DA and say, look, we're not going to get into a full-on, full-fledged coalition arrangement with you, but we're open to discussing a supply and confidence arrangement instead? Because if you put their votes in Parliament together, that's close to 2/3 of houses, or rather seats in Parliament, and that might provide them with a bit of a hedge against whatever conflicts may show up with MK and EFF.
Well, I think that's not off the table. I don't think the way you put it across, it's not that they haven't discussed it. I think what the Secretary General said today was, we know we have to talk to all political parties, bearing in mind that there are those that don't want to talk to them, like the MK, with certain conditions. But I think what the Secretary General said today was very interesting. He said it's about the modality. And so the supply and confidence agreement that you mentioned, I think could be the kind of lever that will give them the kind of agreement that they may have in Parliament.